2021-2022 biennial budget. And this afternoon, the meeting will be held by the Chair of the Finance Committee, Councilmember Pinky Vargas.
Good afternoon, everybody. We are in our third budget meeting. What we're going to cover today is municipal court, which was moved from last Monday. We're going to do parks and recreation, library, the museum, and planning. And I'm going to turn it over to our mayor, Seth Fleetwood, if you have some introductory comments before we turn it over to Darlene.
I don't think I've got anything other than, as you covered pretty much everything. As you know, we had intended to have municipal court go last week, but we ran out of time. So they're going to go first. So why don't, unless any of the folks that are presenting today want to go in some other way, why don't I hand it over at this time to Darlene Peterson at Municipal Court.
Good afternoon. Darlene Peterson, Court Administrator for the City of Bellingham. Good morning, Council, and good morning, Mayor Fleetwood. I'd like to thank you for the work that you're putting into the budget in this very difficult budget period. The court sincerely appreciates the magnitude of the challenges that the city is facing with the current revenue shortfalls. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and our information is in the budget book, page 63. Is that coming through?
Not yet, Darlene.
Okay.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
We're good, thank you.
Okay, so you can see it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The mission statement of the Bellingham Municipal Court is to administer the operations of the judicial branch of government in a neutral and effective manner and ensure access to justice for all citizens. The operations that are mandated for the court constitutionally by statute, case law, and court rules are that we are the keeper of the record. Tens of thousands of documents are processed annually. We're responsible for the filing and processing of criminal charges, infractions, parking and traffic citations, providing public defense, of which 83% of our defendants are indigent. We conduct trials, we provide interpreters, we adjudicate criminal cases, we hold hearings on infractions and on parking traffic citations. We order and process all search warrants, bench warrants, no contact orders, anti-harassment orders. We process appeals to Superior Court, and we provide public access to all court proceedings. Some of the highlights of the 2019-2020 budget achievements are: the court held 12,015 criminal hearings and 2,386 infraction and parking traffic hearings for a total of 14,401 hearings. This was in 2029. We still don't have the numbers yet for 2020. The court also conducts two specialized courts. The first is domestic violence. That is the only domestic violence court in the county. And in this court, victims have a voice. They're heard by the court and they are involved in the process. The second specialized court that we have is the mental health court. This is a therapeutic court and is a part of restorative justice. Defendants that are in this court can get their charges dismissed if they follow through with the mental health conditions that are set forth with their case. We also facilitated and oversaw the city's electronic monitoring program, which we just presented to you in September. We also collaborated with the Whatcom County Jail to prepare an in-custody court at the Division Street Center as they're remodeling the downtown jail. And then we began video court hearings from the jail for all in-custody defendants in March of 2020, and then telephonic court hearings in June of 2020, and those were both due to COVID. When we started our hearings in June of 2020, all of our hearings now are telephonic at this point, except for jury trials, which we have not begun yet. The positions in the municipal court is currently at 15 FTEs. We are short one position, and that position is going to be frozen until revenue streams return and we're able to fill that position. My entire staff has been on site since June of 2020 when we implemented the telephonic hearings. Because of the length of those hearings, we've had to double many court calendars, meaning that we use what we used to be able to do in one courtroom with one judicial officer and one clerk now takes 2 courtrooms, 2 judicial officers, and 4 clerks, as each court must have a judicial clerk to assist the judge and a second to run the telephonic processes. In addition to the freezing of, my slides got ahead of me here. In addition to the freezing of the one position, the court is going to reduce our security contract from 2 officers to 1 officer. This will save us approximately half the cost of the contract, or approximately $40,000 annually. These officers screen all who enter the court for weapons and other prohibited items. We consistently have over 2,000 items prevented from entering our courtrooms each year. We have 2 Bellingham police officers inside the courtrooms at all criminal proceedings. Secondly, the council approved a fund for domestic violence offender treatment. We have adjusted that due to the fact that the program had a very slow start. It was originally set at $100,000 per year for 3 years. As the program has just gotten off the ground, Whatcom County is reducing their budget from $90,000 a year to $20,000 a year. This amount seems like a good starting point for the program, and if we see that the program is successful, we will ask for additional funding as our economy improves. Finally, the public defense contractor who was chosen from a recent request for proposal has contracted for $100,000 less a year, totaling a savings of $200,000 over the biennium. As mentioned earlier, 83% of our criminal defendants are indigent, and as this service is mandated, it is a significant cost. Our work plan for the next biennium is to continue the filing, processing of all documents, and the hearing of all criminal, infraction, parking, traffic cases, and the continuation of our specialty courts. We will continue overseeing the electric home monitoring program, and the court will be transitioning to the new Odyssey program for courts of lower jurisdiction. Odyssey will replace the current system, which the courts have been using since the 1980s and is the same vendor that the superior courts in the state have moved to. And finally, we are considering other options for new diversion and educational programs for defendants. I thank you for allowing me the time to come before you and would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Darlene. Council members? Maybe if you could put up your, Councilmember Hamel.
Thanks, Darlene, for the presentation. It's always good to catch up and see how things are going over at Muni Court. My question is, since Prosecutor Eric Ritchie is reducing VOXA violations or violation of Uniform Controlled Substance Use Act, or drug charges basically, down to misdemeanor charges, are we seeing any impact of that within our own court system, or is that winding up more like in district?
It appears that most of those cases are winding up in district court as they're dropped down from superior court. We've been expecting to receive some, and we may, but the bulk seem to have been going to the district court.
Councilmember Lillquist and then Councilmember Hamel again.
Thank you, Darlene. I have a question about the public defenders. First of all, that was a surprisingly high number, that 83% of our defendants are indigent. If you could just comment, because I'm sure not 83% of people who get tickets or minor offenses are indigent. So, can you comment on why that high percentage end up as defendants in the court as opposed to handling it some other way? And then the second thing is, I thought there was a ruling like 2 years ago that limited the number of cases a public defender could hold. That many public defenders were going well over 400 cases, and the court ruling is they couldn't represent their clients well with too high a caseload. So given that, public defenders had to basically handle fewer cases, and therefore you needed more public defenders. So are we confident that this new contract for a new public defender service, which you said was $100,000 cheaper, handles our caseload, handles it under that court-ordered limit, and provides good defense to these indigent defendants?
Okay, I think I got all that. I'll start in the beginning. First of all, 83%, we have been between 78 and 83% since I started with the Bellingham Municipal Court in 2014. And the one thing to remember is that these are only for criminal cases. We don't do parking, traffic, any of those. We are not required to supply any kind of defense for those kinds of cases, only criminal cases. And so that's been very consistent. I don't know if part of that is because of where we're located in the downtown core. I don't know if that contributes or what it is, but definitely that has been consistent since I've been here at the court. As far as the public defense contract, you are exactly right. There is the qualification that public defense, each defender, it's not mandated, but it is recommended that each one of the public defenders not handle more than 400 cases a year. I have applied for a grant from the Office of Public Defense every one of the last 6 years that I've been here. And part of the requirement of that grant is that we monitor that our public defense attorneys only handle 400 cases a year. When I went out for the proposal, it's a part of the contract that each public defense attorney can only handle that 400 a year. So it will be consistent. And I will tell you that the new firm comes highly recommended. They have been doing other courts in the county, and their reputation to this point is been really positive. So I do feel good about that transition, and I think we'll be well served. Did I miss anything?
No, that was perfect. Thank you very much,
Okay.
Darlene.
Councilmember Hamel?
just going back to DV offender treatment, it's a huge issue in our community. We didn't have that before, and I just wanted you had mentioned it that there was some drop off on the county side in funding. Is that going to affect that program from service delivery?
Well, what happened with that program, Councilman Hamel, is that we had a hard time getting the treatment providers to be able to qualify to get that money for providing treatment. And you're right, it's been a huge gap. Offenders generally do not have the money because many times the households are split, they may be out of work, there's a lot of complications. And what we were seeing is that offenders were not getting treatment. So that is why this was created. With the budget downturn and the length of time that it's taken to get this off the ground, both myself and I have been in contact with Bruce Van Glup from District Court Probation, who runs that program, believe that by having the $20,000 a year, that will at least get us started. And then we can come back to you if we see that the need would be served with greater money. At this point, because it hasn't really gotten rolling, we aren't sure. But you're right, it definitely is a need. At this time, 2 vendors have been approved. We're hoping for more. And my understanding is that it has been put out statewide in case there are vendors that work in other communities and would move up here or open an office up here, which would be really beneficial. So I don't know. That's kind of where we are. Very excited. Bellingham just had its first defendant approved last week, and the county, I believe, has had 2 or 3. So we are rolling now, and we'll see how that goes.
Thank you.
Darlene, I have a question, and if you don't have the numbers right now, that's okay. You can get back to us. But I'm just curious, in regards to mental health court, how many people we are able to serve in a year, and how close is that matching to the need of how many people could actually be in that program?
That's a really good question. Currently, we've had anywhere from 8 to 12 defendants in the mental health court. It is a 2-year program, and it's a wraparound program. We have counselors there. We have people from the health department. We have probation. It's an excellent program. We really could serve a few more defendants in that program. The problem that we have is that a defendant has to commit to working through the program to have their charge dismissed. Mm-hmm. If their charge, even though they really need the mental health treatment, would not require much jail time, many times they'd rather plead guilty and take that time rather than commit to a 2-year program. And I think it's a lot like the GRACE program, where you have to earn people's trust, and they have to be confident that it's in their interest to go through with the program. So that is one of the reasons the program is small. We probably could have up to 15 or 16 defendants at one time. This is something where people come to court much more often than they ever would with another charge. They actually build a relationship with a judicial officer. It's really beneficial. But like I said, the problem is having those defendants be willing to commit to the program rather than just being done with the charge.
So it's not our capacity that is the challenge. So, well, at least that's encouraging, and maybe some relationship building will bring our numbers up higher. Council members, any other questions? No? Okay, Darlene, thank you so much. And again, thank you for being willing to move your schedule and come today instead of last week. So we appreciate that so much. And just to clarify the order of what we're going to go in today, we're going to stick with the same order of our budget book And in that, after municipal court is parks, then library, then museum, then planning. So that's what order we're going to go in. And of course, Nicole must have figured that out because she's ready to go. Unless Mayor Fleetwood, unless you have anything else to say, I'm going to turn it over to Nicole Oliver, our Parks and Recreation Department Manager. And yeah, the challenges you've had in Parks and Rec this year. So it's all you, Nicole.
Thank you, Councilmember Vargas. I'm happy to be here talking about the Park and Rec Department budget. The mission of the Parks and Rec Department is to support a healthy community by promoting high quality parks and recreation services. What we take care of is really an enormous amount of park space and amenities. Over 3,100 acres, 1,354 open space acres. We have 38 parks, 11 special use sites, 80 miles of trails, a conservation easement on Galbraith Mountain with 50 miles of single track trail, and 3 community gardens. Our achievements, I'm going to go over the achievements for each of our 3 divisions. Design and development had an amazing year, with Cordata Park being the front and center of our achievement. It is all open now as of Friday, and you should go up and check out the fully accessible playground. We updated the pro plan. We purchased the Bakerview Clark parcel on Bakerview, which was a great location to fulfill a need in level of service in that area. We're just closing the South Bay Trail this morning to start the Wharf Street Trestle repair project. Juliana Park Phase 2 up in the Cordata neighborhood. Those improvements are just about complete, that were in conjunction with the Horton Road extension to Aldrich. We're still actively pursuing acquisition and public access of Lehigh Pier. Fountain Plaza had a couple of problems due to COVID, but it will be done here within by the end of November. Boulevard Park utility reroute, you may recall, was a very big project down at Boulevard Park to reroute those utilities and take down that structure over the railroad. Shucks and Meadows, that contract is getting circulated. We'll be replacing that playground with a really cool new thing that the neighborhood helped pick. And then the Maritime Heritage Slide, that contract is also being circulated right now. We're going to start that project. And those are just the highlights. Our achievements in recreation, we had the largest music concert in Bellingham's history at Civic Stadium. You may recall back when we all used to hang out together in big groups. We've been really focused on restructuring our fees to reduce barriers. We've been able to translate our scholarship applications, and we've been really working on translation to have our programs be more accessible. We updated the interlocal agreement with the Bellingham School District, was a huge feat. Increasing our partnership opportunities, things like the boat rental at Blodell has been a really fun new amenity in our park system. And then all year, of course, we've been responding to COVID. We've held 124 recreation programs, taught almost 4,000 people to swim. We've hosted 135 special events and processed almost 3,000 facility reservations for shelters and buildings in the system. In operations, fully embraced the CityWorks maintenance system with over 13,000 work orders in the 2 years. We've updated our donation program. It's much easier to figure out how to buy a bench for someone you love or memorialize someone with a tree. We have a great page for that on our website. We started a community dog task force because dogs have been a real, it's just been a really problematic conflict-related thing. And so we're trying to come up with some new recommendations on dogs. We've done a lot more wayfinding signs, You Are Here maps in some of our bigger parks. Resurfaced 6 miles of trails. And one of our most popular things we did was convert 2 tennis courts in Cornwall Memorial Park to real pickleball courts, 6 of them, very popular. And then we restriped courts all over the system to add pickleball lines as well. And the urban forestry management plan is something we're working on with Public Works. So the park budget, we have FTEs in the last biennium, and we're staying with that in the next, but we do have 6 frozen FTEs. We may be hiring the aquatics instructor. I'm working on that right now to see if we can unfreeze that to help. We've had a aquatics employee who has been really important for the emergency management, and they need to keep him. So we're going to try and get that position filled so we have enough people to keep the pool open. The big difference in our budget is really in the capital. In 19 and 20, we had 22,000 in capital outlays, and almost half of that was about 8 million rather was associated with Cordata Park, with everything. So we've cut that down. We're doing a lot of projects. If you look at our capital spreadsheet in the budget, there's a lot of little things, and then there are a few big things, but we really are cutting down our capital outlay this next biennium and completing several projects that are in the works and doing some planning as well. So our work plan, or the budget changes. We reallocated design and development staff to better closely align what the work that they do as far as capital, and then the work that several of them are doing in this very, very busy development time. Our design and development staff have spent a ton of time working with private development. So we're charging that time to park impact fees because it's providing new park amenities for new growth. We also shifted some additional maintenance staff from general fund to greenways to protect positions. We froze 6 positions, and we moved the volunteer program from park operations to recreation so that it can be more part of the recreation coordinator, volunteer coordinator, and have access to all that wonderful energy. Here is just a snapshot of the major capital projects and funding. We have that master plan for Bakerview Clark. This is going to be a really important park. We're going to plan it with the community. It's going to be robust, and it's also going to have an important timeline because there's a lot of work to be done on infrastructure and environmental improvements to that area before we can really develop it as a park. We are just doing the RFP for Cordata Community Park Phase 2. We're working closely with the cleanup of Cornwall Beach area for that park, using park impact fees for that. Fairhaven Park, we're going to be working on a master plan and rebuilding that entryway. Remember the beautiful brick entryway at Fairhaven Park? We're going to try and do something better than what's there, but not quite as awesome as that was. Interurban Trail, we have a lot of trail projects. Arroyo had a big washout, and it's going to be an expensive project to fix that and keep the access for people using that park. We have a couple of maintenance projects that are rather big. West Cemetery Creek Bridge, that's the bridge right behind park operations off of Woburn. It's failed. We need to replace it. And then the South Bay Trail stairs, those are the ones that come down kind of at the north end toward Wharf Street, and there's a big retaining wall there. It's going to be a big project, and that is also, those stairs and the wall are failing. We are still pursuing Squalicum Pier, Lehigh Pier. We don't know what we're going to call it, but we've called it a couple different things, and we're still pursuing that. Whatcom Waterway Park, that's the continuation of Waypoint Park around the back side of those new condos, and coming out at Laurel. We're actively involved in planning for that, and the design has started. We need to do some real good projects at the Blodell Donovan Community Building, and we've got REACH for that, as well as a major civic concrete repair project. The restrooms at Boulevard will be completed next year, and just some other really focusing on repairs and asset preservation with some REAP funding as well. Those are the major projects, but you see our total is quite a bit less than the last biennium. And our work plan, obviously pursuing those pro-plan priorities. We're also going to be coming back with some maintenance level standards for our parks. We are going to be moving city operations into the Pacific Street site with Public Works, updating the street tree policy. We have a reclassification program, a project that is going to take at least the full next biennium. It's similar to something Public Works did successfully that took them several years. And it's really trying to move our system and our positions to be more flexible and support a year-round park system rather than so much seasonality. We're going to be doing the recreational needs assessment. We're going to use Engage Bellingham for that. And then we're also going to explore some revenue, additional revenue. Sponsorships is something Bellingham really hasn't embraced as far as parks. We're doing some research with Snohomish County's been very successful with that. And something, I just did some quick numbers and we could bring in some good revenue if we just charge for that boat launch at Bodell. And if you have any questions, I am happy to answer them.
Okay, the parks budget is on pages 64 and 65. Council members, questions? Councilmember Lillquist.
Thanks for the presentation, Nicole. I have two questions. I'll handle one and then ask to be recognized again. It has to do with capital outlay. You point out that the capital outlay over the next 2 years is lower than it has been because we had some huge expenditures, planned expenditures before. Is it fair to say that that's like a reduction in response to the budget climate, or is it really just that's still going forward at regular speed? Have we slowed down at all? And the reason why I ask is the funding sources for that are Greenways, REIT, and impact fees. And all three of those are relatively healthy, have not been significantly impacted by the economic downturn. So our revenues are healthy for capital. And frankly, we still have a healthy capital spending. So is the rate of capital spending pretty much what it would have been prior to COVID, or has it been adjusted due to COVID and the economic recession?
I don't believe that it's been adjusted due to COVID or the economic recession. I think that the capital outlay for parks kind of fluctuates because there's planning and design, and then there's building. And so we have just completed some really substantial construction projects and are now in this next biennium going to be doing more planning. With the design and development manager frozen, that is an impact on services for design and development, certainly. So there is that. And then, I mean, the development that is happening, developers are building trails for us in the north right now as part of their projects, and working with the development to create the easements and create the routes and examine the building permits. It's a lot of time for our division. They're spending a lot of time working on those projects that are coming from new development that they're building in the north especially.
Council members, any other questions? Go ahead, Michael, and then Councilmember Hamel.
So my second question has to do with the possibility that was talked about in previous years of co-location of the YMCA and Arnie Hanna. I mean, for that to happen, the Y was planning on running a significant capital campaign for a multi-million-dollar facility, and the possibility that they might long-term lease or have some kind of co-location possibility next to Arnie Hanna. Is that totally dead in the water due to the coronavirus, or has anything happened since January?
Sure. We actually had a meeting fairly recently with the YMCA, and we both reiterated that we both still think that it's a great idea and we'd like to pursue it. We know that it's obviously not going to be as quick or as it may have been beforehand, but they're interested, we're interested. So it's still on the table, and we just recently had a meeting to kind of reiterate that intent.
Councilmember Hamel?
So city-owned parks and recreation assets for North Bellingham are critical as we move forward with development in that part of our community. For the $1.5 million for Tilbury, or I think it was called Squalicum Pier in your presentation, is that design and development, or how much closer does that get to providing for that asset for folks?
Well, we think that it's going to be a phased approach. We didn't want to budget the full amount of money that it will take because we don't have it yet. So first we need to acquire the asset completely. It needs to be permitted. It's going to be phased, we think, and it'll also be part of the demo project, which has now been postponed till next year, that Tilbury is on the hook for to demolish, or Lehigh, to demolish most of, the substantial part of the pier that's out in the DNR tidelands. So the 1.5, we think will be phase one.
Council members, any additional questions for Nicole for Parks? Anyone? Okay. Nicole, thank you. We know it's been a very challenging year for Parks, and we really appreciate everything you've been doing for our community and to keep our parks healthy and safe. So thank you for everything, and appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we are going to move on to library, and our library manager, Rebecca Judd. Rebecca, we're going to turn it over to you, and the library budget is on pages 68 and 69.
Wonderful. Well, good afternoon, Council. I wanted to also begin with a thank you to you and to the mayor and to the mayor's budget team for all of your hard work during this really challenging budget cycle. It is appreciated. Okay, library 2019. Looking at the 2019-2020 department achievements, 2019 was a big year for us. The library circulated just over 1.5 million physical items and just under 300,000 digital items. And during this same period, 737,000 people visited a library location. And then if you break these numbers down, these 2019 numbers down into a typical day, 5,500 books, ebooks, audiobooks, digital audio, and other items were borrowed. And 2,200 people visited one of our 3 locations. Also on a typical day, 25 people signed up for a new library card. 1,700 holds were processed. 94 people attended a library program. Library staff answered 400 questions directing people to library and community resources. And 224 people logged into a public computer at the library. Well, 2020 statistics, they are a bit of a challenge, but right now with our curbside pickup of holds, we are serving just shy of 2,000 people a week. And as far as checkouts, we are circulating right around 50% of our 2019 numbers for physical materials, but then 140% of our 2019 numbers for digital materials. And we are also processing around 18% more holds than we processed at this time last year. Also in 2019, the library completed our 2020 to 2024 strategic plan. Our plan was built on community voices. We spoke with 343 people in group meetings and individual interviews to better understand our community and incorporate diverse viewpoints into our planning. The plan was adopted by the Library Board of Trustees in December 2019, and it includes 5 strategic directions. They are welcome and include, access and opportunity, read and learn, inform and involve, thrive and grow. And then specific initiatives under each direction are built out as part of our annual action or annual work plan. And then as a side note, I wanted to say that we were really looking forward to presenting the strategic plan to council and talking all about our community conversations project during National Library Week in April. But, in the way of 2020, we had to postpone that presentation, but we do look forward to coming back to council soon with a more complete library update. Next, in partnership with the Whatcom County Library System and with budget support from the city, we ended the collection of all overdue fines in the 2019-2020 biennium. Research shows that fines discourage library use, particularly for low-income residents. By ending the collection of overdue fines, we wanted to remove a barrier to city services and promote equitable use of resources. The Central Library main floor remodel is underway now. New study rooms and restrooms have been framed. LED lighting is going in. It's very exciting to watch the space transform. The design work and planning were completed in 2019 with our colleagues in Public Works and with RMC Architects. The bid award for construction was made to Tiger Construction this spring, and the project is on track to be finished in early 2021. This project also included the selection and purchase of an automated materials handler, also known as a book sorter. And that's going to help us keep up with a high volume of materials that we process in a timely way. And last but certainly not least, we have worked hard to pivot our service delivery model and initiatives to meet current health and safety guidelines and community needs. We now offer curbside pickup of holds at our central library, Wi-Fi hotspots that you can borrow, and with thanks to our IT department, improved wireless access outside of the central library, as well as Fairhaven. In addition, we have developed a series of virtual story times, shifted budget dollars to digital collections, staffed a library call center, supported the Whatcom Unified Command and citywide Zoom service, and with financial assistance from our Friends of the Library and also the Hagen Foundation, we have been able to make our anti-racist reading list always available, meaning that these 19 ebooks and digital audios can be downloaded anytime someone wants to read or listen to them. There are no holds on those. And finally, honoring the need to create meaning and connection around this shared experience we are all living through right now, Bellingham Public Library and Whatcom County Library System brought together community partners to create People's Perspectives, COVID-19 in Whatcom County, which is a county-wide initiative to capture and archive our experiences during the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, our proposed 21-22 proposed budget for the library is divided here into revenues and expenditures. On the revenue side, you'll see an overall reduction of $70,000, which reflects the elimination of overdue fine collection at the library. Charges for goods and services and miscellaneous revenue are the same as in the 2019-2020 biennium. And then on the expenditure side, you'll see a slight reduction in our overall bottom line rather than the increase you would expect with cost of living increases and step raises. And this is accomplished through frozen positions and furloughs. In particular, with frozen positions, we have a newly funded children's public service librarian position that is on hold. We have a vacant full-time specialist 2 position, and this is a position that supports programming, outreach into the community, special projects, as well as direct public service at our help desk. And we have a vacant part-time clerk position that is frozen, and this is a position that supports direct public service at our help desk. This next slide is a summary of budget changes. I already touched a little bit on the frozen positions and furloughs as a way to bring down salaries and benefits expenditures. Of note, in the line item and program expenditures, our budget for materials, so our library collection, will be holding steady in the coming biennium, and that's really good news. And then for the 2021-2022 work plan, we are still working through the details of this with our Library Board of Trustees, but certainly we are going to continue to phase in and adjust library services based on our central library remodel timeline, based on COVID-19 health directives and safety directives, and then budget realities. So just recently, for instance, you may have seen that Governor Jay Inslee issued revised guidelines for libraries, allowing some indoor activity in phase 2 at 25% capacity with strict safety protocols and local health department guidance in place. This was really exciting news for our community. And it's true that the central library remodel, will make additional services downtown a challenge, but we are evaluating options at our branch locations based on health and safety guidelines and community needs, and working on a recommendation for the Library Board of Trustees and for city leaders to consider. So next, we will continue to evaluate and adjust library services based on the newly adopted strategic plan and our new strategic directions. So this might not be the biennium to bring forward a lot of new services, but it's a great time to plan and prepare for when those resources are available again. So that's what we'll be doing. Digital equity and digital literacy were important areas of focus for us in 2020. And we anticipate that those needs will be front and center for many in our community in the months and years ahead. So working with community partners and city partners, we will continue to evaluate and implement services that increase access to technology and build technology skills. And finally, it's important that we tell our story, that we find multiple ways to inform our community about the services we provide, and that we find ways to bring the library to new audiences. Annette Bagley, who has just joined the library as our new head of community relations, she just started on Friday. And working with her, we are excited to update and implement a new communications and marketing plan. And with that, I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rebecca. Well, you know, the library is our most used public facility, so we know our community misses it, but it'll be really exciting to see its new remodel when it's all done. Council members, questions for Rebecca? Councilmember Stone and then Lillquist.
Thank you, Councilmember Vargas. So I know that at last week's Cordata Neighborhood Association meeting, I made reference to this when Mayor Fleetwood was presenting, and I also gave Library Director Rebecca Jett a heads up, but just on behalf of the Cordata community, I understand that the budget is what it is, and there are, you know, limitations as far as expansions, but this is not a new request, but rather a renewal of a request, in thinking about, you know, an additional branch. And so as the community knows, we have a branch location in Fairhaven, as well as one at Barclay Village, and then the central location in the downtown core, and really looking at a branch location up towards the northern end of the city. Certainly, a lot of your presentation speaks to the fact that the library is much more than the books on the shelves, and the sense of community that provides. And so my concern is really surrounding equity, and especially as we look to the future and not knowing what COVID will, you know, permit with respect to libraries, trying to provide maybe multiple locations with, you know, smaller numbers of people served. And so I just want to share some details that the Cordata neighborhood has been doing a lot of outreach in this effort and has spoken with Austin Israeletsky, who's with the Brookfield Properties Management, who oversees the mall. And they have identified that this would be an appropriate alternative use, and they are excited to look into the possibility of providing a physical space, but obviously needing, you know, staffing and books to make that happen. And so I just want to encourage, you know, with respect to the budget, how that is actually utilized in the community in the, you know, in the upcoming biennial, to please give additional consideration to how we can provide that additional community outreach to the Cordata neighborhood in the northern part of the city.
Thank you, Hannah. Well, improved library service on the north side of the city is something that we are all really passionate about. And it's specifically mentioned as a priority area of focus in our most recent new strategic plan. So we absolutely look forward to planning and conversation about how we can improve those services for that part of the city. Thank you.
Councilmember Lillquist.
Thanks, Vicky. So Rebecca, a few comments. First, I was really pleased when I looked at the budget and didn't see deep cuts in the library. In the last recession, 2008 recession, library took some of the deepest cuts, in particular in acquisitions and materials. and it took years actually to recover. And there's been some rethinking about what materials the library needs to have here physically on hand and what we can do digitally. But I was pleased to see that in this recession, it's kind of a hold steady budget. So that's a comment. I'm also pleased to see that you're continuing community building and connecting activities in your programs, trying to figure out ways to do that. I've said for a long time, libraries, as Hannah said, they're not just places where books are on shelves. They really function as community centers. And if we try to fund them as if they're just book distribution centers, we're never going to build good libraries. So I do appreciate the continuation of those in a virtual form or whatever form. I guess my question is not really budgetary. I mean, Ainsley says that we can include up to 25% capacity, under the current regime, but that depends upon your facility. I don't know. I'm thinking that 25 number for most buildings is hard to hit safely, especially because we're trying to redesign our libraries to have everyone come in fewer points of access to kind of like narrow the flow of people. For safety's sake, now that creates a new hazard. So can you imagine going up to 25% operationally within the next year? And have you sat down and tried to figure out how the heck to make that work? Because there's a lot of planning. It's not just opening the doors and counting heads. It's changing everything about the layout and operations and staff interactions and all of that. So do you think we can open up for in-person community building, or do you think we're going to stay virtual community building through the next year in your budget?
Those are great questions. There are a lot of moving parts for us right now, not only with the pandemic, but also with our building being, our main downtown library being remodeled. So we continue, just as we have this entire year to run the numbers, see what we can do, what's the best service we can provide, what are the highest needs for the community right now. But certainly if there's a way that we can do it in whatever location we have, in whatever way, we want to be able to provide the best service that we can. So it's a difficult question to answer because we're still in the planning stages for these new announcements, these new guidelines that have been issued. But we're approaching it with, let's leave no stone unturned. Let's see what we can do, and let's see if we can provide the greatest good to the greatest number of people.
Councilmember Knutson and then Anderson.
Yes, I was glad Hannah brought up the Barclay Village branch. How long are we on a year-to-year lease? How is that working? I remember when we first started, but it's become so popular to have that over here. How long do we still have that space?
That's a great question. We just finished renegotiating a licensing agreement with Barclay. They've been enormously generous during this budget downtime. We will be taking over, right now, the library's in a 750 square foot space in a suite that's 1,400 square feet. And so we're going to be just assuming that entire suite here in this next year. A Barclay company, just wonderful partners with the library, and we see a long future for that location.
Thank you. I had a question about the hotspot and also lending out the hotspots and then also increasing the Wi-Fi ability with the downtown and Fairhaven, primarily increasing opportunities for public access to Wi-Fi. Have you been looking at any partnerships where perhaps, looking at Barclay, looking at the north side of Bellingham? Currently, I think one of the biggest barriers for a lot of people is that ability to have that free Wi-Fi, whether it's people who are currently homeless or students. I know some college students, I know some parents who are trying to work at home and also with kids struggling with bandwidth abilities. So I'm just kind of wondering if that is a service that you're looking at expanding. And if not, I highly encourage that to be a consideration.
Lisa, that's a wonderful question. We've been working, digital equity has been an area of focus for us this last year. We started with the city facilities. So Fairhaven and the Central Library are both buildings that are owned by the city. And so increasing wireless access was a good place to start. And to date, we have not been in conversations with Barclay Company around Wi-Fi, but we do understand that there are needs everywhere for increased access to wireless. So thank you. Yes, we are working on Wi-Fi access and expanding our mobile hotspot lending program as much as we can. Right now, we have funding for 55 hotspots that we are lending. Some are on the Sprint T-Mobile network and some are on the Verizon network. And those have been a popular service for us. Thank you.
Council members, any additional questions? Councilmember Lillquist.
Small, quick question, Rebecca. Those 55 hotspots, how do I know where they are? How does the community find them?
Wonderful question. So they're listed in our library catalog. You can go online to our website, www.bellinghampubliclibrary.org, and type in on our catalog search hotspots, and you'll come up with the list, and you can place it on hold. So we have curbside pickup of holds. So we'll pull it for you, and then you can make an appointment to come and pick them up.
Thank you. Any additional questions for we've already done parks, for the library? Thank you, Rebecca. All right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate how the library has adjusted to help our community and do the drop-off pickup service, and so that people can still get their books. And so thank you so much for accommodating our community in that way. So thanks for your time, Rebecca. We are now going to move on to the museum, and this is in page 70 in our budget books, and we are going to be led by Patricia Leach, our museum manager.
Thank you, Councilmember Vargas. It's a pleasure to be here. Good afternoon to all of you council members and our mayor. I too wish to thank you for all of the hard work that you're doing, both our mayor and council and also our budget team in such trying times. It's amazing what's happening, and we're very supportive and appreciative of everything that you're doing. I'd like to refresh you a bit about what it is that are our priorities and our mission. First of all, our mission at the museum is to provide innovative and educational programs and exhibitions about art, nature, and Northwest history. We seek to stimulate curiosity about our changing cultural, natural, and historical landscapes for the youngest to the oldest minds, and to inspire preservation of and creative contributions to our region and beyond. We have several values that have emerged as top priorities in our strategic planning process, and I'd like to just share a few with you because I think they're relevant. We're very committed to engaging in resource sharing partnerships that contribute to the public good. We also are committed to providing a welcoming environment for civic discourse that serves a diverse community. We want to build respectful and inclusive cultural relationships. And finally, we uphold the highest professional standards of stewardship for our collections, exhibitions, and educational programs. I've mentioned this to you before. The museum was recently reaccredited by the American Alliance of Museums in 2018. And that's huge for us and for our community in our ability to bring amazing works of art to share with you. And it's especially significant since there's only a little over 300 museums in our country that have that accreditation status. We have welcomed, mostly in 2019, around 75,000 visitors to our campus, around 20,000 children to our Family Interactive Gallery, and a little over 5,000 children in our school tours, which range from not only Whatcom County, but to nearby adjacent counties. And now I'd like to highlight some of our recent accomplishments. We completed 7 major exhibition installations in the Lightcatcher building that have received national attention, including Ed Burrell wanted for disturbing the peace. And you may recall the amazing New York Times article that was covered this exhibition. The Smithsonian American Art Museum loans that are still on exhibit at the museum as part of the exhibition Conversations Between Collections also has received national attention, and we're fortunate that that loan has been extended into March. And of course, modern quilts, which was hugely popular and got lots of publicity. We also hosted a number of smaller exhibitions in the old City Hall. One in particular I'd like to highlight was one on minerals, which surprisingly to us, it was amazing to me to see the rock hounds who emerged to see this show. I mean, people from all over the Pacific Northwest came to see this collection, which was quite amazing. We also recruited 3 new members to the Museum Foundation Board of Trustees. And this is important. We created and filled a Lummi Nation tribal liaison position, and that is currently held by Teresa Taylor, who has been extremely helpful in our relationship building efforts. We worked with our board member and also tribal council member, Frederick Lane, to bring the Tokatai story pole to Bellingham on its journey across the country. And we worked with Children of the Setting Sun to showcase canoe journeys in the Lightcatcher building. We also hosted a amazing 10-foot glass sculpture by Lummi artist Rhea Friday. And we will continue to do those kinds of things. We began a new grant-funded project with Children of the Setting Sun, which is part of phase 2 of new improvements and content to People of the Sea and Cedar Gallery, which is our most popular gallery for the schools in our region. Sadly, that program halted with the pandemic, but we're anxious to get back going on that. We also launched new access programs, which I think are really important. One of those, there are 2. One of them is the low sensory access program, which is designed for children who lie somewhere within the autism spectrum. And the second program we title Museum in Mind, which is set up for people who are newly diagnosed with dementia. I'm sorry, I'm into the next slide. One thing I wanted to point out was in early 2019, we received our very first payment from the Whatcom Dispute Resolution Center because of the sale of the ARCO building to them, we were so happy that we could make this happen. And we think they're a very important organization, and I think they're wonderful, located in our downtown. Our staff continues to work with the Smithsonian American Art Museum and the Terra Art Bridges Foundation on a very large scale exhibition of works from the Smithsonian American Art Museum and our partner institutions, which will open at the beginning of 2022. Although excuse me, I need to go backwards. Let's see if I can, oh dear. I don't know how to go back. Thank you. I wanted to, well, although you can't see everything that we do, we did,
What's up, Patricia?
There we go. Thank you very much. I'm sorry about that. We did update our website and move to a newer platform. And in our efforts to reduce our dependency on the city's general fund, we were able to recruit and fill the collections curator, the curator of art, and an exhibit preparator position and move them from COB over to the foundation. The foundation also created and recruited for a brand new position, which is a digital marketing coordinator. And that's been really important to us, especially since the COVID-19 hit in converting everything to a virtual platform. And finally, our education team had to pivot everything over to virtual programming as a result of the COVID-19 so that we can continue to serve our community. Now, our proposed budget, which is on page 70 of the budget workbook, We're very small. We're at 4.4 full-time equivalencies. We have no frozen positions. And you'll notice that in the revenue, the intergovernmental revenue will remain the same. And on the same thing with the expenses, the supplies will remain the same for this next budget. The changes that are occurring, again, are the furloughs that are on tap. We have no frozen positions and no reductions in line item budgets or programs. I do want to mention, aside from the general fund, we know that the lodging tax is significantly down. And in the budget, we are proposed to receive a 20-cent reduction in the LTAC funding. I know that the budget that the museum receives is really a combined budget of both the COB and the Museum Foundation. And currently for 2020, that combined budget is down 17%, and we're projecting for 2021, 15%. And that's largely because admissions obviously went way down, or down to nothing, although we've been open now for exactly 1 month. The Family Interactive Gallery has been completely closed, but we have no facility rentals and of course no school tours. Beginning on March 16th, we furloughed the foundation frontline staff and some COB frontline staff. We have been open for a month now. The ramp up is very slow. We're not seeing the numbers that we're used to seeing. And with the Family Interactive Gallery closed, well, normally we get about 500 people a month and we're just over 100 people a month. So we're very anxious to make the improvements to the Family Interactive Gallery and get it reopened. For our upcoming work plan, our priorities are to focus on strengthening our tribal relationships and community outreach, again, with the help of our liaison. Our museum store also has some wonderful offerings of local tribal art. People of the Sea and Cedar Phase 2 project is going to get back going again, and that will include content for exhibitions and education. We will continue our focus on underrepresented people through exhibitions, programs, lectures, and education. And by that, I mean Indigenous people, women, the LGBTQ community, and people of color. One thing I wanted to bring to your attention is we will be showcasing photographer Matika Wilbur and her exhibition Seeds of Culture in March or so of next year, which we're very excited about. And we're partnering with the Welcome Community College and various tribal entities on that show. We are extending our exhibition schedule for longer periods of time so that the community can have access during the COVID-19. Although we have reduced hours, we close at 4:30 now so that we can accommodate deep cleaning. Exhibits you're going to find, instead of running for the normal 3-month period, will go anywhere from 4 months to 6 months. And we will continue to enhance our virtual and school programming and expand participating partners. One of my big focuses will be to look at multi-streams of revenue enhancements to raise operating dollars. And last but definitely not least, and I've mentioned this several times in this presentation, we're making many changes. We're in the midst of construction, completely changing the stations in the Family Interactive Gallery, and we're very anxious to get that reopened again sometime in 2021. And that completes my budget presentation, and I'm happy to take questions.
Council members, questions? Thank you so much, Patricia. Councilmember Lillquist.
Sorry, Patricia, you couldn't get it without a question. So I appreciate that you're adjusting to the lower revenues, especially the lodging tax. So the museum is sort of like, not the same, but similar to the Mount Baker Theater in that you really largely operate on funds and resources with the foundation on your own, more so than the city. Again, the Mount Baker Theater doesn't really rely upon the city, but we do own those facilities. Mm-hmm. And so the big worry with Mount Baker Theater is when there's large capital improvements that are necessary in that glorious old building. Your buildings, some of them are new or newer. In your budget, are there any large facility or capital expenses that are on the horizon or that have been deferred for budgetary reasons? Or are those buildings in fine operating condition and there's no like pending issue with deferred maintenance or deferred capital improvements?
There are no large capital projects on tap for the museum, but I see Eric is with us, and I do know that Public Works does have some work planned, and Eric may want to get specific about that.
Well, nothing specific, but I think it's safe to say that some of these buildings are some of our oldest buildings, and there are a number of things that need to be looked at. For a number of reasons within this next budget cycle where we are really constrained on the amount of money we're putting towards city facilities. The museum is no exception in its entirety. There are a number of projects that need to be done at those, not the least of which is to replace some of the windows. Some of the columns at the old city hall need to be replaced. The light catcher building has some work that needs to be done on it. So there are significant needs for facilities upgrades and improvements and renovations and preservation. We're aware of those. But the way that those get budgeted is not through the department budget. That gets budgeted largely through the facilities budget. So you'll see those not as capital projects in either the museum or library, but in the facilities capital budget as well.
And I'll just add to that question there that we're constrained a little bit on our museum investments in that the museum from our assessment is not qualify for REIT. So the main funding source for museum improvements has to be the general fund, and in the current environment that makes that complicated.
Thanks, everybody. Council members, any additional questions on the museum? All right, well, thank you so much, Director Patricia Leash. We appreciate your time and appreciate the service to our community. And with that, we're going to move on to our last budget item of the day. And we're going to go to planning, which is in our budget books from pages 71 to 74, 71 to 73. Sorry about that. And I'm going to turn that over to our planning director, Rick Sepler.
Okay. There we go. Good afternoon, council members. It's good to see you. I'm joined in this presentation by our Assistant Director, Greg Alcott, as well as Division Managers Tara Sundin and Kurt Nabafeld. We're in a kind of a unique position in the sense that council gets to see our work. It often comes before you in either presentations and proposed actions that council responds to, or certainly in public comment. As we look at our achievements over the last biennium, it's important to kind of note that I think you're well aware of some of the activities that have gone on, but to put them in perspective, there's specific aspects of them I think that merit being singled out. As we look at our permit review, that's the single largest function our department does. That's the most FTEs are committed towards it. And it is one that helps increase our supply to accommodate growth and stabilize rental rates and to provide greater housing choice. It has significant immediate and long-term benefits to the community. The immediate benefits are that it is a significant engine for both jobs in the community and revenue to the city. We set records in 2019 in terms of permit volumes and valuations. And we were well on track in 2020 in the first 3 months. Since then, like most areas, we've seen it slow, but the slow has not been precipitous. It is a decline because there were so many projects that are in the pipeline and perhaps a greater urgency to get them done, largely while they still had financial commitments. We do anticipate looking at permit revenue into the future to see a reduction, but we're hoping it will be a short-term reduction because the market is still extraordinarily strong long-term, and folks who have the abilities to move forward will continue to advance their projects. In terms of housing production, we provide housing opportunities and options for low-income community members through our housing levy and housing fund. And we've made significant strides. We were in front of council just a couple of meetings ago, giving an update on the progress of the work we're doing and the commitments we've made for the coming year. Our COVID-19 response is something that reflects the ability to be agile and to respond to an emergency circumstance in quick order, to provide services that can really help focus outcomes for the community's good. In doing that, Council is aware that we helped the drop-in center relocate to Bellingham High School. We established the base camp shelter. We helped get Byron Street, the isolation facility, up and running. And we've been facilitating the CARES Act funding to be provided to the community. All significant actions and all truly dependent on significant focus by the resources we bring and the extraordinary work of department members in making that happen. Not only do we actually physically make and help things happen, we are good advocates for things that are vital to the community. I think Council will recall that we had a significant role in bringing to the table partners to ensure that a provider of childcare, a significant provider of childcare, remain viable. And we acknowledge that childcare is essential in our community and in our economy. And it is a hallmark of our commitment to folks who live here. And through the good work of a number of individuals, I'll single out Tara for her excellent work in this, we were able to assure that slots that may have left are still offered. Homelessness is a significant issue. It's one of the most challenging we face as a community and as a nation. We have provided financial services to help folks avoid dealing with homelessness and been responsive to the changed circumstances we observe in the community in terms of those who are unsheltered and providing appropriate means of going forward. We've made progress in this area, but it's still a very challenging issue that will remain into the coming biennium and beyond that we need to address, not just in Bellingham, but societally. And our plans and regulations, we have continued to advance a number of changes and refinements to our rules and regulations that are both insightful in terms of the future, where we'd like to be when we grow up as a community, and responsive to changed circumstances within the community. That includes advancing residential multi to achieve its truest densities as intended by the comp plan, by assessing manufactured home parks to ensure that that very affordable means of entry into ownership is preserved, to facilitate a number of comprehensive plan amendments to ensure our policy base is consistent with our community needs and vision. In our coming budget, it is much that we are somewhat status quo in terms of our staffing. We have 2 frozen positions. In addition, we have 2 pending hires, but there'll be 3 unfilled positions that will hold at this point. And you might ask, why are we holding them? As Council is aware, we needed to suspend our rental registration inspection component. To go into 4,000 homes with inspectors was not in the community's best interest in terms of public health. And the best advice from the health department is to continue with that postponement for the near term. In doing so, we do not have the revenues coming in for rental registration, and we can choose to balance that by unfilling some of the positions that we have outstanding. In looking forward to the coming biennium, we anticipate likely as much of a 20% drop in revenues from building activities and other permit fees coming in. That is one that would be comparable to what we've seen so far, but likely is very dependent on how the market progresses into the future. If it is a longer term, slow slope out, it'll be harder. But what we're seeing in some other areas that have passed the worst threshold of COVID, the response, because most of the infrastructure is still good, has been quicker. So we're hopeful that'll be the case for us. As we look at our budget changes for 21 and 22, the funding for the GRACE program, monies that have been transferred from the police department have doubled. We are maintaining the current level of funding for all of the other general fund and human service programming. That's really important. That commitment community and making sure those programs are able to continue is vital. We have really fine-tuned our allocation from general fund to the development services fund as much as we are allowed to, consistent with the state law. And we feel very defensible in the changes we've made. As noted by Patricia, the lodging tax revenue was significantly reduced in 2020, lost about $900,000 compared to prior years. And it's projected to be reduced by about 40% in 2021. And this is a very important consideration because the investment in lodging tax leads to the marketing that develops the assurance into the future for a very hard hit portion of our community, hospitality, restaurateurs, hotels, others who are highly dependent on us keeping visible as we emerge from COVID for folks looking to visit our market. It is really important for us also in the budget changes to acknowledge that we have to be very strategic with the available staff resources we have. There is a cost to furloughs. It's about 6% of our capacity has been reduced, and critical issues demand more focus and more time. With that, we've shaped our work program, and you'll note this is a 2021 work program, to really focus on the issues that are most important to the community right now. And we'll look and reassess at the end of 21 and expand that into the biennium, the full biennium work plan. In doing that, timely permit review consistent with all our standards. We're not waiving standards or lessening them, but we're just ensuring that we get the permits out into the marketplace as soon as possible is probably one of the most significant things we can do to help our community. You've heard previously about the effect it has on local economy and jobs, but also on the long-term viability of our community by providing additional units. It stabilizes rental rates, it provides choice, housing choice. And even though it's hard to see right now, as we're in the midst of a crisis, we'll emerge from this crisis and Bellingham will still be a desirable place to be. And we anticipate Washington growing as anticipated, though it might be a year or 18 months later before we get back on that trajectory. We have reprioritized our work program to really focus on COVID response and recovery. That's dealing with all of the CARES Act dollars. Those awards are going out now to help those community members who applied. And we are also reprioritizing work plan to deal with our unsheltered facilities. Now, Council, as you're aware, we have an RFP out there right now for safe parking. That would provide a niche, if successful, for some members of our community. However, you're also aware that our primary emergency shelter, that's base camp, is nearing capacity far earlier than we anticipated, with some relief anticipated in December by the Christ the King Church using the old drop-in center to provide supplemental housing. However, if we're able to make the next couple of months, it'll be to all our good fortune. But beyond that, there is a likelihood we'll need additional capacity. And it is a likelihood we'll not be in the position to be able to construct a full project to accommodate that, or a number of projects that are brick and mortar. We need to be looking at temporary encampments. And in doing so, we are preparing an RFP that would look to establish temporary encampments. I have to caution council, these are expensive and they are extraordinarily labor intensive to approve. When I talk about expense, it could be as much as $500,000 in capital expense to prepare a facility for them, and $300,000 to $500,000 per year to operate. And that's if the city is able to find a partner through the RFP, as well as find land and city provided land that can accommodate it. While we will ask the county for help, we're uncertain where that funding will come, but we do know that the need for capacity is great. I will say that looking at what's out there, this is a significant lift, not only for our department, but for our city. And it is highly unlikely that we'd be able to develop more than one temporary encampment. The notion of doing safe parking, temporary encampment, and other shelters is probably well beyond the reach of both your staff and the finances we have available. I will remind you that the county is the lead agency for homelessness, and we would look to them to provide other services. They don't seem, though caring, I don't think they're inclined to go down that direction, hence the need for us to move forward. Other work that will continue, but be of a lesser priority, is to complete the processes that are under interim controls. We are mandated when we establish an interim control or a moratoria to complete that work with high priority. And that would be residential multi. That's moving forward. Actually, we'll be at MNAC, Mayor's Neighborhood Advisory Committee, this week and presenting to them. And we're at the point after our open house to start crafting proposals that could be considered by the Planning Commission. The manufactured home parks, as I've provided information to you previously, it's somewhat problematic in the sense that we're not able to get the full participation we'd like from residents due to limitations on gatherings. We're hoping some relief in the next 6 months, and we'll be able to continue it. I will say that there is no property right now that is being considered for redevelopment immediately, nor for resale for other uses. So fortunately, we don't have that pressure, but we will be thoughtful and complete that. We are also required to complete the state required processes, and that's the Shoreline Master Program update. As council is aware, the Department of Ecology, it's their program, but it's administered at a local level with many processes having final approval at the state level. We're on a timeline to do that. It is not a complete rewrite. It is a fine tuning, and we've started the work towards that. We'll continue to implement the home fund and housing levy. And we do have an additional $1.1 million in CDBG, or Community Development Block Grant, which can be used for COVID recovery and might be considered for some of the temporary encampments, perhaps, as a means of moving forward. We will need to continue to work with our partners at the county on the countywide planning policy update. This is a very focused update dealing mostly with appeal processes, but their buildable lands, as mandated by the state legislature, is a critical process to us. For council might recall, buildable lands determines if within your urban growth area you have adequate area to provide for the population that's forthcoming. Great concern was raised by some members of the community, notably the builders and the realtors, that the methodology the state had used for a number of years was incorrect, and therefore our methodology would be incorrect. New methodology is being employed. I will say we're fairly confident it will reflect that we have made the right choices in terms of capacity, but we need to be open for the results and continue to participate as we move forward. We will complete our design review update. We've had a very robust discussion with an excellent steering committee that's brought a lot of good points forward, and we've got a good set of design guidelines that are standardized and consistent. And we will proceed with our family definition review. We hope to be able to do some surgical code amendments in the coming months to help improve recovery. The world's changed a bit, and we need to be responsive to it. For example, we are probably going to find greater commercial vacancy rates for the next 5 to 10 years than we've anticipated, due unfortunately to the COVID pandemic. Requiring more commercial to be built, for example, on the complete frontage of all our mixed-use buildings, may be counter to the community's interest of keeping that market viable and robust. Those are the kind of things you do to make adjustments. They're not permanent, but they reflect the near-term realities, and they do help us get better products on the ground sooner. As we look, we'll look for every opportunity to take that. We, of course, will support the climate action initiatives that are coming forward. It's critical for us to keep pace and to keep advancing those actions, and we have a part in that. And as I mentioned before, we'll continue with rental registration and inspection. We'll resume our inspections when it's deemed appropriate for our inspectors to enter so many private units. There is, however, change in focus does have consequence. We can't do it all. We need to pause or support only for the following: Annexations. We'll respond to annexation petitions, but at this time we need to pause our efforts on it. Urban village planning, again, we can assist those who are advancing it, but we would be hard pressed for us to advance on our own. The clearing and grading and plan unit development ordinances, they need to wait till the pandemic lessens and we're able to bring our resources out of the immediate need into those issues. Parking revisions to address environmental, economic, and social factors can continue, but it's not one we can bring an initiative forward in the near term. And the urban forestry master plan, we're happy to provide support on that matter. We're not able to specifically lead going forward at this point. Again, that's for 21 only. We hope to reinvestigate and reprioritize. We hope to see some successes in the issues that are coming forward. And with that, my colleagues, well, I'll turn to my colleagues first. And I'll ask Tara and Kurt and Greg if you have any additional comments you'd like to provide on this budget briefing.
Thank you. I don't have any additional comments.
The only thing that I'd like to add is Rick did talk a little bit about the development community, it being down a little bit, our permits down a little bit. But as of today, we have just over 1,300 units under construction and another 900 units in application phase. So there's still a lot of stuff that's out there that's happening and still quite a bit in the pipeline.
Okay. I will say that it is busy here, reviewing permits, advancing projects. Could need somebody to turn their microphone off, I think. Oh, it's gone. Good. Advancing projects and facilitating planning. But my colleagues and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have about our budget or our work plan moving forward.
Greg, did you want to add anything as well, or are you good?
No, I don't think so, Pinky. Rick did a great job of summing things up. So happy to answer questions.
All right. Thank you, Rick. I will turn it over to council members. Councilmember Lilliquist.
Thank you, Pinky. So I have a whole bunch of questions about your work plan and important priorities. I'm going to try to make it a budget question, basically.
Okay.
You said an urban forestry plan, which I would like to see where we integrate land use planning and open space planning. Right now, they're in kind of two separate universes. And you say you're going to be in a support role, not a lead role. On unsheltered facilities, you talked at length about, the need there, the fact that the county is the lead agency, but still we're going to proceed with an RFP, another RFP in addition to the one that's currently out there. But you indicated that staff resources are spread thin. On climate initiatives, similarly, I think there's a lot of changes, especially the kind of the lowest cost and biggest benefit in new construction would be in closing down the use of fossil fuels as heating resources. I'd like all these things to go forward. Will I see, is there room in your budget for the staff resources for those initiatives? It seems to me during an economic downturn, that's exactly the time to not be spending on big projects, but on making programmatic changes, planning changes, rule changes. I'm worried that we won't make enough progress on all of those. I think I mentioned this to you. I'd be willing to consider those kind of like essential aspects of recovery and community priorities and fund them accordingly to have them, in a sense, be more insulated from budget impacts than maybe other things. I think there's a question in there. I mean, basically, I want to make sure you have enough resources on all of those things, and not just to have them go forward at a so-so pace, but to go forward at the rapid pace I think those need. Climate change is urgent. Addressing homelessness is urgent. These things really can't wait for 2022.
So if I might respond, of course, we'd like to advance everything. We believe everything is important to the community. The reality is that we have to make hard choices. And there is a carrying capacity of what a community can support. And I will tell you right now, just doing, for example, a temporary encampment, doing a tiny home village, to go for an RFP to get that established, will take virtually all of our resources in multiple divisions to advance fully. These are not easy to locate facilities. These are ones fraught with politics, but it is the thing we need to do. And I guess the sense would be is that our priorities are ranked. Putting more resources may not necessarily mean we'd be able to get to it, because our attention is going to be focused on those hot points that need all hands on deck. And sometimes there's a natural speed with which they move through. We can't make them move through further. So I guess the short answer is we can hire more planners, which is very costly, and where the funding would come in is beyond me. But I don't know if we'd be more productive. I think we have a good nucleus and a good team. I think we've made good choices based on your direction, quite frankly, council's direction of what's important. And as tempered by our resources, I think it's the best we can do to go forward. Again, I'd like to advance it all. Our full intent is to go to the hot spots, go to the heat, address those issues, get through the crisis, and then reallocate resources to be able to advance things more broadly.
I guess I'm not entirely reassured. You say it's taking all our resources. In my experience, if budgeting to 100%, it's kind of a mistake, because you're going to get new things come up. You need some headroom, need some slack in your budget. So I'm still concerned that we don't have enough resources to have even our highest priority items go forward. That's a comment, and I'm going to be talking to, I guess, Seth and you, Rick, about that issue. I want to make sure we've given you the support you need.
If I could just jump in for a moment and push back a little bit, just the way you framed the question implies that we're, quote, not advancing these things. We're advancing all of the things that you mentioned. We have work plans for all of the things you mentioned. So I just want to underscore that. They are being advanced. And we do have staff actively working on all those things. Whether it's sufficient for your purposes as it relates to speed and rate is a fair question, but they are all being advanced.
Councilmember Hamel?
Thanks for the presentation. I appreciate it. Good updates. My question is for Tara Sundin in regards to access to quality, affordable childcare. It's one of the biggest deficits in this community for families. My understanding is that the county is perhaps looking at making an investment as well, or investments perhaps in this area. I just want to get a sense from you, Ms. Sundin, so I can tell my constituents, are we going to be playing constant catch up with this issue? Are we stabilized to some degree? What is the status in your opinion overall?
Well, one of the action items for this year that I was not able to get to, that I talked to council about last year, and the reason why I haven't gotten on it is because of COVID and my work programs totally changed. But as you recall, we have an issue just overall. I mean, nationally, we have an issue with childcare. The state has an issue with childcare. And one of the things I wanted to explore this year is how could the public sector become a partner in starting to think about childcare facilities as public infrastructure. One of the things that we have just advanced, because your staff's talking about it all the time, is there's 4 affordable housing developments in the pipeline or getting ready to enter the pipeline. I can't name them all because they're not quite ripe, but all 4 of them are talking about childcare facilities being the ground floor user. So that's something that we're looking on and I haven't had time to look into the idea of a 108 loan to support that. And we have been talking with the county about the EDI fund. Beyond that, I'm not aware of the county working on a funding scenario for childcare, although there are discussions about family generations forward and family initiatives that are being discussed at the county level, if that might be what you're referring to.
Yeah, that answers my question. Thank you.
Okay.
Council members? Councilmember Anderson.
Okay, and I just wanted to note that Holly has her blue hand up in the side panelist bar. My question is probably more for the mayor and also our finance team, Andrew and Forrest. As we're looking, and this is, I think, a good time to bring it in, because as we're looking at trying to fund housing opportunities for those experiencing homelessness and our budget constraints to take care of all of our obligations across the city, I'm wondering about bank capacity. I know in the past we have taken the property tax increase and at times perhaps not. And I believe that would leave a bank capacity available to us for to be able to utilize in the future through an increase in that taxation, if my understanding of bank capacity is correct. And I'm wondering if you have talked with the assessor about what is available, and if you haven't, can you confirm whether or not we do have bank capacity, and then how much that would be, and then what would be the process if we should, as council, decide to perhaps dip into that bank capacity in order to try to provide additional funding to help with our hopefully future encampment.
I know this budget was built with the expectation of bringing forth an ordinance taking advantage of the permitted 1%. I don't believe in our discussions, Forrest, we pondered the idea of utilizing bank capacity. Do you know off the top of your head, Forrest, what our bank capacity is?
I don't have a number off the top of my head, although I do have it in my files. I would have to pull it up. But I will say that in general, the city does not have a large amount of bank capacity. We typically take the 1% every year. There is some, what I would call sort of fake bank capacity related to the home levy and the increases related to that. So that could theoretically grow by 1% a year, but we have committed to the taxpayers through the ordinance, the way it's structured, that it would be held at a set amount. So it would not inflate every year. So it's a set $4 million for that levy. So there is some capacity associated with that that could theoretically be taken, although whether that would be counter to what was put before the voters would be something to be debated. But next week, or I'm sorry, at the next council meeting, we'll be doing the revenue forecast for 2021 and looking at property taxes, and I can have more information about the property tax levy at that time. And that's sort of a precursor to bringing forward the property tax levy ordinance at the first council meeting in November.
So just a quick follow-up on my end, I'm really not that interested in increasing what taxpayers have agreed upon. So the housing levy, I think if we tell the taxpayers that this is what it's going to be, then we have an obligation to stay there. But primarily I'm interested in the past bank capacity for general property tax, because I know it wasn't taken every year. And since the inception of those limitations of how much it could be increased. So I'd really appreciate finding out how much is available, what that would translate into dollar amounts, and then what would be the process should we decide to take part of that to try to increase above the 1% that might be coming forward with our revenue. Thank you.
We will absolutely have that information for you.
Councilmember Huffman.
Forgive me for not turning my video on. I'm in a spot that doesn't have very good internet, so hopefully I won't be too choppy. First of all, I wanted to just make a comment and say that as a member of the small business community, the planning and permitting staff has been so critical and so helpful for keeping small businesses above water during this pandemic. So just let you know that's really important and something that I've heard repeated by many others. but my question is entirely different. And Kurt touched on it a little bit. I was curious about the number of new residential units being approved, and if we're seeing numbers that look like what we would have predicted at the beginning of the year, or if COVID has changed that much.
Yeah, I think a lot of the units that we have under construction right now, obviously we're going through the permitting phases and had already received financing prior to COVID. So those projects were kind of moving along. We did see a slight decrease in some manufacturing and some product delays on some of those things that have slowed some of the projects, but things are continuing to ramp up again. One of the things that's going to come, excuse me, I did mention we had about 930 units in application right now. I think this is going to be a telltale to see just what happens in the future to whether or not the banks will continue to fund those projects. So they're going through their land use enablement phases right now. And then, that next phase is actually building permit and construction. So if we can watch those that have received the land use application approvals and just watch them as they step into that next phase of actual construction, I think that's going to be a real sign as to how strong the economy is and the banking lending institutions are.
Okay, I'm going to take a turn. So first of all, the planning department has also been extremely hard hit in regards to COVID and having to adapt and do all kinds of things. And I wanted to recognize Tara Sundin for her work on base camp and childcare that has gone above and beyond this year. And I know that was a lot of work, and really wanted to recognize her for that. But also for Darby, for all of the business grant, all the CARES funding. And we went through 3 different rounds of CARES funding, and getting that money out into the community is really going to make a difference for a lot of our small businesses. So you guys have been wearing a lot of different hats lately that weren't on the work plan last year. So wanted to acknowledge you for that. And also the importance of prioritizing permits, because the planning department has the biggest impact in regards to our economic recovery and supporting planning. I kind of am leaning towards Councilmember Lillquist in regards to ensuring that the planning department has all the resources they need. And I am more willing to support that because it has a direct correlation on our economic recovery, on our housing, and on all of those things moving forward. So there are a couple things that I have moved down in priority on the list, and they do give me a little bit of concern. Now, I know that is no lack of you guys trying, it's about not having the resources. And any way that we can support, I'm willing to look at whatever we need to figure out that you guys have the resources you need. Michael mentioned a few of those, but another one that is on the list is the clearing and grading. And I'm curious how much that getting moved down on dates as well is also going to affect how we're building and what's in our pipeline and making sure things move forward. And I know that we said that we were going to do that in 2018, and for circumstances, resources, all the things that have been happening, that a few things have been pushed down in regards to priority. And I want to support that you guys have the resources to make sure that we are helping our economy move forward, and that the issue and the challenges are not on the city side, and that we can help our communities. So I guess the question is that how much is there a way that maybe we can look at getting you more resources, if that would make a difference, and if you'd be able to tackle some of these things?
So I'm always appreciative of when council's concerned that we don't have the tools we need to do what we need to do. I will say that this is really how do you allocate your resource now in an emergency, and can we do that for the short term? And we've made a good choice, I think, in terms of where we're putting our emphasis, because I think it has the most profound benefit for the community. We do have two hires. I mentioned there are two hires in progress. One is a planner, which will give us some more capacity. And the second is to a development specialist who will help the community economic development folks move forward more fully. Both are needed areas. And that can change and help us advance some of the work we've got. But I will say that this is one where I can't, with my awareness of our financial state as a city, with my understanding of our local economy, adding to staff right now may not be the most prudent step. And I think that we need to work with the resources we have and focus on it. If we see this be more protracted than we anticipate, if we see ourselves halfway through the next of 21 and circumstances worsening or not changing, it's probably right to reevaluate some of the things we do. But I think at least for the next 9 months, we really need to focus on those other issues. And the folks we have now are the ones who are trained up and ready to go. So respectfully, I appreciate the notion. Certainly it's a rare department head who says, please don't help me. But I think for the good of our community and for the city, we have to balance our needs. And at this point, we can advance some things and take it to the finish line. The real question would be, are we advancing the right things?
Councilmember Anderson?
Thank you. I did have a question just because I'd like to have a little bit more insight on the budget line. I tend to look at things where if I see a really sizable jump and I'm assuming what I think might be the cause of it, I'd really like just to verify that I'm not making a misassumption here. So on page 72, under the Planning and Community Development, all funds, under other funds and charges, in the past, historically, it ranged between $7 and $8 million. And in 2002 revised, it jumped up to almost 18 million. And then next year it would hang very close to the 18 million. And then 2022 dropped down to a little under 12 million. So it's kind of a sizable jump over historical. And if you could maybe just identify what some of the increases in that budget might be.
I'm not able to respond right now, but I certainly can look into it and find out a little bit more what's attributed to those and get that information to council. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I appreciate it.
Tara might know if
the housing levy contributes to part of it.
Yeah, and we can get the breakdowns on that more fully for you.
It's housing levy, and also there's increased federal grant revenue next year related to the CD community development block grants. But we'll get that breakdown.
Since it was listed under expenditures, I was just trying to see if there was a correlation in increased revenue somewhere else, and I personally didn't identify it. That's why I was asking.
I'll just provide one example. We planned for a number of years with project, let's just say Barclay Village. We've been working with Barclay Company and then Mercy Housing on a housing development out there that's in excess of $2 million. And so sometimes you'll see that fluctuate with the housing levy because all of a sudden now that we've got a couple of big commitments with the Aloha and Mercy next year. That's one example.
Council members, Councilmember Knudsen.
Yeah, just a comment. I want to thank Rick and everybody who's presented today. You know, you've all done a great job of presenting your budgets because you're not getting that many questions. You know, you've worked very hard. This has been a very difficult time. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank you all. But I also want to pay special attention to Rick and how he's come into our city a few years ago and taken over a department that those seasoned veterans below you on the screen there know very well how difficult it can be in planning sometimes. It seems like every issue we have is planning. And you tackle it and you talk to people, you email people, you call people back. it's one of the less complaints I get is they're not getting a response from the planning department or any department. So I just want to thank you all. You make it a lot easier for us when we're not only responding to people, but you guys who are right in the heat of it all do also. And I want to thank you. And just a side note, Greg's hair is much more grayer than the rest of yours. So I just wanted to put that in there. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, I'm blessed to have great colleagues, and they are remarkable at what they do, and they are also committed to doing the right thing for Bellingham.
Council members, any additional questions for planning? Okay, that is our last session today for budgeting. I just wanted to thank everyone. As Jean was saying, I know that it is difficult right now when it comes to planning your budgets because we don't have a lot of money. And everybody has to be a little bit careful on the money that we're spending. And I think everybody's done a really great job on their budgets. I just wanted to give me a moment here. I just wanted to pull up the timeline for budgets for next week. Sorry, I have to switch screens here. Just one second. Come on, open. Okay, maybe that's not coming up for me. I thought I had it convenient. Our next budget meeting will be before our city council meeting next Monday. And I'm just looking to see who's on the list. Yeah.
Oh, Councilmember Vargas. So I have here that's HR, finance, IT, and legal.
Thank you. That's the page I'm looking for. I appreciate that. So, and we'll have one more meeting after that. We'll have the first week in November. We'll have one more budget meeting, which will be city council, which will be council and the mayor's office. So with that, unless anybody has any additional comments or questions for today, Councilmember Lilliquist does.
Yeah, Pinky, and actually, I don't know who exactly. Are we going to have a pullout session to discuss the capital budget? That's often kind of dealt with at the end because, of course, it cuts across all departments. Or are we just going to kind of hit capital as each department rolls through?
I think that's a request maybe for our mayor.
Yeah. Let me talk with the team and find out our expectations in that. Forrest, if you've got a notion on that, dive in. I don't recall precisely what the plan was for the capital budget at this point, but we can come back to you with that.
We've been trying to just highlight it as we go through the departments, and obviously the Public Works presentation will be heavy on capital since most of it flows through that department. But if there's maybe if there's further need after Public Works, we could certainly find time to do that, or if it's we'd just like to do it anyways.
I think I'd like a high level review of capital at the end. As you say, we'll hit half the capital in Public Works, and we've covered a lot of it already just in parks today. I think it's always been very useful. Actually, some of the largest expenditures we ever do are in the capital budget, and so I think it deserves attention. So I would appreciate some kind of high level review after we go through all the departments.
We'll do that, Michael.
Okay. All right. If there's nothing else, then until next time, this budget meeting is adjourned. Bye now.